with, of course, the debate tonight, race relations, how divided we are in politics. We forget about the sports world. We got the NBA Finals, Game 1 tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lakers, Miami Heat. The Stanley Cup Finals just ended. Congratulations to the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Raiders, our own Las Vegas Raiders, are back in town as the Buffalo Bills come in with a very, very good record and a very, very good football team. We got a lot going on in the sports world, and it shocked everybody. I shouldn't say everybody, but it certainly shocked me that Doc Rivers was fired as the LA Clippers head coach, and the guy joining us right now on the line used to be an employee here at KDWN, moved on to bigger and better things at KNX Radio. That is Bryant Ping joining us right now on the line. Brian, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm good, Brian. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So before we get to this Doc Rivers story, I just want to share this with you. As I'm sure you're aware, Governor Gavin Newsom just approved legislation by this, in due part because of this Kobe Bryant helicopter crash. And he's saying that if anybody, first responders, share unauthorized photos or take unauthorized photos of the deceased, they can face up to a $1,000 fine, and it's now an official misdemeanor. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's pretty natural to expect something like that to come because there is, as you know, major controversy after members of the LA County Sheriff's Department who had access to the scene, allegedly took some of those unauthorized photos and shared them with each other and with anybody else who wanted to see them. And, it stirred up a lot of anger, especially when there were calls for, NBA players and other athletes to show support for the ambush police officers here in LA County, which happened in Compton not too long ago. They say, okay, we'll do that when you address this same department who took this egregious action and accessed the site. So to see actual government action here on this is not surprising.
You know what? I'm a little, maybe, I don't know if you tell me if you agree or not with this. I don't think that's a stiff enough fine. If you're sick enough to be a person on the scene of a horrible tragedy like what took place to Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and those others, if you're sick enough to take pictures of it for your own personal enjoyment because you're nuts, and not only that, but you share it with other people, I'm not so sure if I'm the father or the son or a family member of somebody that died, and someone says to me, well, it's okay, it's going to be all right because we're fining that person $1,000. I don't think that's enough. Am I wrong in feeling that way?
Yeah, not necessarily wrong. I think that Governor Newsom felt that he needed to take some action now just to show where he stood on the matter. And this is always something that can be further taken up by the legislature with more of a pressure campaign put on them as time goes on. But yeah, you're talking about the privacy during a tragedy, and it certainly wouldn't be unheard of to have stiffer penalties given the nature of what it is.
Right, no question. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Bryant Ping from KNX Radio in Los Angeles. So I wanted to talk to you about the LA Clippers. I'm a fan of Doc Rivers. I think he's a good man. I think he's a good basketball coach. Great? I'm not so sure, but he's a good coach. He gave my Boston Celtics an NBA championship in the days when they have Kevin Garnett. They had Paul Pierce and, of course, LA Laker now, Rajon Rondo. I was a little surprised. This is what I've heard, Brian, and I've heard from friends that are very close to Doc Rivers. And what I've heard is that there were two people responsible for the firing of Doc Rivers. That is Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They were not happy with Doc Rivers, and there were chemistry issues. And, Kawhi, from what I understand, he tried to get, San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich, to leave as well. So while Kawhi Leonard is a very quiet, well-mannered guy, I think behind closed doors he doesn't get along with certain coaches. That's what I've heard, Brian. What have you heard, and what was your first reaction when you heard that Doc Rivers was gone?
Well, one thing that you have to remember is when they bring on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George all there at once in that offseason, not only does it make them a co-favorite to win it all, but it also really changes the makeup and chemistry of that team. Just the year before, they were the scrappy underdog. No one expected anything of them, but they took the Warriors almost to the limit when the Warriors were still really good in that first round, and they overachieved. And now, all of a sudden, they're thrust in this role where they are expected to do well. And I think the pressure got to a lot of the role players and prominent players on the team prior. And then when you go into this unfamiliar bubble environment, we know it was hard in particular on a couple of guys. Lou Williams and Paul George, it's been well documented. Those two in particular did not take well to having to be in that bubble environment at all. And how much you can pin that on Doc Rivers for having to steer them in we'll never quite know completely. But as you remember, the Clippers, they voted to leave the bubble when we had the crisis after the Jacob Blake shooting and everything went on pause for a few days.
Right.
And they never really recovered from that. They just seemed after that like a team that had lost its will to go on because they had had enough.
Yeah.
And whether you can pin all that on Doc Rivers, I don't know. But another thing to consider, too, is that the current owner of the Clippers, Steve Ballmer, he didn't hire Doc Rivers. He's a guy that, likes to think of himself as a big disruptor from his days at Tech with Microsoft, and he wants to put his imprint on the franchise the way he can. And I guess he just could not tolerate this one more humiliating exit.
Who do you think is the favorite now to be the next Clippers head coach?
I have to say Ty Lue. He's in-house. If he's already won a championship, with LeBron in Cleveland, so he'd be a high candidate. I know that he's been talking with some other teams and like Philadelphia and the like. Maybe they look at a guy like Mike D'Antoni. Yeah, we know that D'Antoni's handled a lot of stars before, so he could be comfortable in that environment. Jeff Van Gundy as well. But you think of, I believe it's 5 NBA teams that now have a coaching vacancy. You got to think with the Clippers, with Leonard and George in the fold, a new arena coming in a few years, and the LA market, it's the most attractive job out there. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think they're going to have trouble finding a quality name. But again, we go back to the chemistry issue and who can handle the stars, whether the big name is necessarily the right name.
Right. And by the way, what we've heard, you just mentioned the Sixers. We know that Mike D'Antoni is a front runner for that job, but we've just learned in the last 24 hours that the Sixers have inquired about Doc Rivers as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Hey, Brian, let's talk a little bit about the NBA Finals now. Of course, it's the other LA team, of course. That would be the LA Lakers in the finals now against the Miami Heat. And I think you can make the case that Spoelstra, this is probably the best job. I think he's a very good coach, but you can make the argument, best coaching job of his career, what he's done with this Miami Heat team. Yes, they have talent, but the way they just dismantled the Boston Celtics and the way they played since round one, it really is incredible. I still think the Lakers are going to win this series, but I do think that Miami can steal a few games, and I don't think it's going to be easy. I think the key to the series is LeBron getting to the rack, and Anthony Davis is a huge matchup issue for the Miami Heat. How do you see this series going?
I mean, if history dictates, you think of lower-seeded teams like Miami, which is a 5. I mean, they can make deep runs, but in the end, it's usually the top dog, if you match him up with them, who takes it all. And just by that alone, and having LeBron and how good he looked, particularly late in that Denver series, and they're in Game 5 in the capper. I don't know how you go against the Lakers here, but you're right, Brian. He's done such an excellent job navigating this team, and he has some really good talent there, and Butler and Adebayo, guys that could definitely squeak a win or two out and make it an interesting series. But I think there's a lot of expectation and buzz that the Lakers are going to get it done. It's been a decade, which is a long wait for Laker fans
right.
To win a title. So I think they're going to bring it home. I really do.
I do as well. I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but assuming that the Lakers do win, and I do think they will, how weird is it going to be in L.A.? I mean, would there even be a parade? Are they even talking about that during a global pandemic? I would imagine that your governor would probably not allow that. Has there been any talk about that recently?
Not been talked about that at all, and you're right. It is going to be strange to see what they do. Something virtually, I don't know how you pull that off. Maybe have it in Staples Center and broadcast it to everybody, but that's going to be a logistical challenge for sure. And if you do, then it's going to be the mess about keeping everybody distant. I don't think there's going to be a mass gathering event. I think you can rule that out easily.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they'll get creative. They'll think of some way to make this a big show without necessarily having a lot of people together.
No question. Brian, I always appreciate it, man, when you come on our show. You're a great friend of the show and a good friend, and I appreciate you doing that. I know you got a busy job. It's been kind of a busy news cycle the last 6 months or so, but
a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a little while, that's for sure. But I appreciate you coming on as always. Great job, and we'll have you on again soon. Thanks, my man. I really do appreciate it.
Looking forward to it. Thanks always.
All right, there you go. Thank you. That's Brian Ping.